pleased to be joined by Maggie Gallagher, who is a senior fellow for the American Principles Project. And she's written an excellent piece in First Things that we referenced earlier in the week about politics and culture, essentially arguing that those who suggest that politics is downstream from culture don't have it quite right. So let's explore that with Maggie Gallagher, who joins us now. Thank you so much for being with us. Appreciate it.
Well, I'm great to be with you. Thank you. Good morning.
So, my perspective on this is culture is everything, and so I concede your point that politics is a part of culture, which is what you write in your piece. But does the nature of politics being a part of culture mean that we aren't ultimately or shouldn't ultimately be focused on kind of the proverbial culture war?
Well, no. It means right now we're living in America where everything is being renormed so that people who believe in kind of some simple, basic truths like you're born male and female, we have a need for men and women to come together to make and raise the next generation together. That idea is called marriage. These things are now being renormed as hateful. And so, and it's obvious that the Republican Party is increasingly useless in terms of doing anything about this. And so the question is, what do we conclude from that? So I would agree absolutely with the people who say culture is really important and that, those of us who are people of faith have to figure out how to build creative subculture communities to transmit our own values and our own faith to the next generation. The only thing I don't agree about is that means we should somehow get out of politics. What we did is we took a really serious look. What I really believe is the reason social conservatives are easily betrayed and not very politically influential. The most important reason, there's a lot of reasons, but the most important reason is we're not really in politics. We talk like we're in politics, and you have people who go on television and say political things. But if you follow the money, what you find out is that we, unlike the left, and particularly the gay left, have not built political institutions. So we looked at every organization in America that says it has some public policy goal around marriage or religious liberty. And we asked, okay, so how much of your money do you spend in politics affecting who wins an election? That's what politics is. It's not pastor organizing or 501c3 voter guides. Fundamentally, these are all fine things to do, but they're fundamentally, they circle around. Are you actually going to go into politics and elect your heroes and unelect your enemies? And the answer is 97 cents on every dollar we spend to affect public policy is a nonprofit 501c3 apolitical strategy. And the left doesn't do this. And by the way, they don't do it at all. Like you just take the top three socially liberal organizations, Emily's List, Planned Parenthood, and Human Rights Campaign. And in the last election cycle, they spent $70 million just in PAC money, and social conservatives spent less than $10 million.
Right.
Every single organization in the country. So I would say we should give politics a chance before we conclude that it's useless right now, and it's a problem for everyone. The grassroots and the donors have nowhere to give because the organizations that claim to be political or are standing in and trying to be political aren't actually in politics. So that's just, a fundamental hole that has to be filled if we're not going to be persecuted in America as the ideology that our ideas are like racism and hatred unfold.
Well, just to give a concrete example of this, you do in your piece, but I want you to connect the dots for us.
Sure.
About, if you want to fight for this culture, if you want to fight for your value system, then you necessarily have to be involved in politics because the other side is aggressively pursuing it, and they're happy to roll right over you, as we see being done. But the example that you give about how the left does it versus how conservatives don't do it effectively, is former Colorado Congresswoman Marilyn Musgrave. Give the Marilyn Musgrave case study to us.
Well, that's just so. At one point in my life, I was probably the major spokesman fighting gay marriage. So I watched a lot of this unfold. And one of the things I watched unfold and I learned from everything I know about politics, I learned from watching how the gay left actually operated. So Marilyn Musgrave was a Colorado congressman. She was one of the original sponsors of the federal marriage amendment, which would have said marriage is one man and one woman. Didn't say anything else, and would have prevented the Supreme Court from doing what it did to overturn our efforts in the states. But the left targeted her for her opposition to gay marriage. But they didn't fight her on that in her district. They knew that she was representing her voters. So instead, they just raised a bunch of money, and they dumped it in negative ads on her on all kinds of issues, including, as she told me personally, she said they created fake pro-life organizations to demonstrate, to claim at least that I wasn't pro-life enough. And they did it in one election cycle, and they knocked down her numbers, so she barely hung on. And then they came back in the next election cycle, and they defeated her. And everyone in Congress knows, although the voters, even in her own district, probably don't know, is that the reason she lost is she was a spokesman against gay marriage. And it's an extremely effective way of shutting down one party on the issue, so that the Democrats are all in and they're pro-gay marriage, equality, love wins all, and the Republican Party is kind of silent and shy. They can't quite be for gay marriage because they know their voters won't tolerate it, but they won't speak because they don't want to become targets of the left.
Well, how has LGBT community tightened its hold on culture shaping?
Well, so one of the reasons why politics is more important for conservatives than it is for liberals is that liberals dominate most of the other means of culture creation. So one of the things I can tell you, because I was there, is that the problem wasn't really that our messages don't work. It's that they effectively shut down our ability to get our message out. So the more effective I was, or we were, working together in the states. So once we won California and Prop 8 in the year 2008, suddenly I was unable to get on Fox News. Suddenly I was unable to get on conservative radio. The major stations, the big boys with the big advertisers. And it took about another year before I suddenly wasn't able to get on CNN. And eventually I could only go on MSNBC, where they would openly treat me with contempt if I shut up. So, and I could give you other examples with other people, but the capacity to control what you see through Hollywood or Madison Avenue. And the big new thing is that corporations are now joining social liberals. So corporations, the Chamber of Commerce is the most effective and most public opponent of conscience protections for traditional believers in the state. And people are afraid that if they say anything, they'll lose their jobs. And nobody on the left has this fear. So, of course, we could talk about what's going on in colleges and the academy. But if you look at it, so politics, what I learned when I was very young and Ronald Reagan was elected president, is that politics is the way you can break through that messaging shutdown and learn that you're not alone, that other people have the same views and values as you do. And I think that is one reason why it's important to recognize, as Rod Dreher and the Benedict Option has said, that we are facing new threats to Christianity and to do a lot of things to build faithful communities who exemplify Christ. But one of the things we can't afford to do is retreat from politics. You have to learn how to do it better, how to do it real, how to do it as a subculture and a minority that really does need new protections. Because the fact that President Trump is not aggressively pursuing the same strategies to use government to oppress us doesn't mean the next president won't do it if there's not legislative protection. And without a real political movement, the GOP is going to be useless. It's not going to act.
She is Maggie Gallagher. She's a senior fellow at the American Principles Project. A piece you should check out that I tweeted at Dan Proft is culture is downstream from politics, which you can also find at firstthings.com. Maggie, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
If you're talking